It may be kind of old news by now, especially as the DLC has been out for over a week, but man did I have to come back to the channel just to talk about this new DLC for Risk of Rain 2. DLC 2 for Risk of Rain 2, Seekers of the Storm, dropped last week, and it's been an absolute circus show of events from the new developers and owners of the IP, Gearbox. We all already knew the reputation of Gearbox, especially in the last few years, but I and many others were cautiously optimistic about this new DLC, especially with the little bits they kept showing us up to its release, which made it seem much grander and epic than the first DLC made by Hopoo Games. I'll admit, I had my hopes up, and even if the DLC was bad, I thought it'd be okay as the game itself would still remain the same, and I'd just get a bit of extra content in addition to some new survivors. What I didn't know is that Gearbox would not only release a pretty middling DLC, of which the details I'll discuss in just a second, but the patch that released alongside it would break the entire base game, even making the amazing game drop out of its super highly reviewed category on Steam. Let's start with the obvious problems, and that's the gigantic list of bugs that came with this new DLC. From a bug that makes it so when you pick up a certain item, the final boss Mithrix becomes invincible, to the damage output of enemies being incredibly higher than before, making death so unexpected. There's of course much worse, but there is way too many bugs to account for, and it's quite baffling how Gearbox's Risk of Rain team didn't even test this, because if they did, they'd realize just like us that there's a problem with the game every 5 seconds you're playing it. From my understanding, as someone who is game development ignorant, the developers for some reason tried to unify the code bases of the game on the console and the PC versions, so they could release updates simultaneously. That may sound great for consumers on paper, but clearly Gearbox didn't think to check that all of this went smoothly. The result of this is the overwhelmingly high amount of bugs that came alongside the patch with this new DLC, and a game that is frankly broken in balance and technicality in comparison to what it was just 2 weeks ago. The most egregious of all of this is the fact that the game's physics, enemy spawn rates, and many other factors of the game itself are linked to the frame rate that you're getting. I don't even know how this is possible for an experienced developer, but this is one of the worst bugs I've ever seen in a game. Gearbox also hasn't really responded to the majority of the bugs at the time of this recording, although a patch is coming, which is in stark comparison to Hopoo's approach with the release of their DLC. Not only did that DLC not break the entire base game, but Hopoo was extremely transparent in their desire to fix all of the issues that did exist with the release of the DLC, and within the span of a few months everything was fixed, and it's hard to say that's going to happen here. But that's enough of the bugs, and I'm sure you've already heard a lot about them or experienced them in your own game over the last week. Next, I think it's important to discuss the lack of understanding of the new team, which I think is prevalent in the new DLC's content. There are a few redeeming factors which I'll discuss later in the video, but first it's clear that the new team doesn't really understand how to balance the game or how the game itself is supposed to operate. The items added in this new DLC, for lack of a better description, honestly sound like they were all generated with AI. They don't sound unique in any manner and sound like super generic items which add nothing to the game other than diluting the game's existing loot pool. With many of the game's base items, when you pick up a ukulele for example, you could see the effects of your new item in real time, and this made it super satisfying to make a certain build in a run and to rock certain items and stack them. The new DLC items however lack that in every capacity. I do like one item, namely Sail Star, mainly due to how broken it is, but everything else in terms of the items are super lackluster in this DLC. They add nothing to the game's overall synergy of items and actually make the game's item pool diluted and just make it super annoying to make the normal builds you would before, because now you're getting a bunch of generic items which add no significance to what you're trying to achieve in your run. Let's again compare this to Hopoo's DLC, Survivors of the Void. They did something extremely smart with the items they added in this DLC, in how they created a new category of items in the Void items. By adding new items in a unique way that wasn't part of the game's base loot pool, players not only gained extra items to spice up their runs, but were given a choice in how they had to trade in existing items to get the Void items, which were different versions of items that already existed in the base game. This was an extremely smart way to add more items to the game, and a significant number of them at 41 items compared to this new DLC's 18 items, and it's really added more strategy and fun to the overall gameplay loop in a way that these new items don't really do in any capacity. There's also problems in the amount of content they added, such as in the previous example with the items, they added only 3 new monsters compared to Survivor of the Void's 11 new monsters, with 0 bosses being added, while Survivors of the Void added 3 new bosses. This disappointed me the most out of the content that was added, as I would have really liked some new bosses in the teleporter event and some new enemies, but this unfortunately wasn't added. The content of the DLC is super lackluster, and the fact that it's the same price as DLC 1 is also quite insulting. I don't like to make all of these comparisons, as this is a new team working on the game, but it's clear they don't understand the game properly and don't understand how to add meaningful content to change its gameplay loop. Even the stages themselves, while beautiful, are designed in such a weird way, as they are overly large and vertical, making them an absolute pain to traverse, in stark contrast to how Survivor of the Void's new environments were mostly flat and super easy to traverse with any character. Now, enough of the gloom. What are some of the redeeming qualities of this new DLC? Firstly, the new DLC's artistic design is incredible. From the stages to the survivors, the new team is clearly talented when it comes to art direction. The new stages look stunning, and I've been in awe just traversing around them. In addition to this, I found the 2 new survivors which I've unlocked so far extremely fun to play with, and unique characters that are super distinguishable from the survivors we have already. This is especially true for Seeker, which I'm finding super fun to play with abilities that are incredibly unique and an absolutely broken ability to revive your teammates in the middle of a run. The survivors are great, and the stages look absolutely incredible, which are the main redeeming qualities for the new DLC. However, it's still hard to see a way out of the mess we are currently in, and the work that's going to be needed in order to fix all of the issues now in the base game is going to be a tedious journey, and one I'm unsure if Gearbox can navigate, but I am a little optimistic in their ability to come out of this and hopefully provide us with some improved DLC and content that addresses the shortcomings of this DLC in a significant manner. Anyway, that's all from me for today's video. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.